For a child, a parent's presence during a time of crisis is everything. It's the hand to hold, the familiar voice that whispers you're going to be okay. It is the anchor in a sea of fear and pain. For Isabel Brown, her father's absence during the most physically agonizing moment of her young life wasn't just a disappointment. It was a wound that festered. Now, according to reports and exclusive legal theories we've been tracking, that wound has become the basis for a lawsuit that could not only bankrupt a patriarch, but challenge the very definition of fatherhood in a court of law. What you are about to hear is a deep dive into a story that has, until now, remained in the shadows, a speculative analysis based on insider whispers and legal precedent. This is the story of a daughter's fight for justice. Hey, crew. And welcome back to Sister Wives Crew. Before we dive into the explosive details of this alleged lawsuit, I need you to do me a huge favor. What we're about to unpack is one of the most intense and detailed theories we have ever covered. If you believe a parent's first duty is to their child, hit that like button right now. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell, because you are not going to want to miss a single update on this developing story. The details we have are truly shocking. Alright, let's get into it. The crack in the foundation. To understand the gravity of this alleged lawsuit, we have to rewind the clock. We can't just look at the surgery. We have to look at the years of pain, the broken promises, and the toxic family dynamics that created the perfect storm for this legal battle. This isn't just about one missed flight. This is about a pattern of behavior that Isabel's legal team would argue amounts to a catastrophic failure of parental duty. Isabel Brown's battle with scoliosis was a central, painful storyline for years. We, the viewers, watched her endure excruciating pain. We saw her diligently wear a brace, contort her body into painful positions for physical therapy, all in the desperate hope of avoiding surgery. And through it all, her mother, Christine, was her rock. Her champion, her constant. But where was Kody? Now, to be fair, the show depicted him as being present in some moments. But even then, there was a sense of detachment. We saw him push for non-surgical options, which on the surface seems reasonable. But sources close to the family have long whispered that Kody's reluctance was less about avoiding an invasive procedure for his daughter, and more about avoiding the logistical and financial inconvenience it presented for him. Let's be clear. This is a theory, but it's one supported by a mountain of contextual evidence. Kody's world, especially by this point in the family's timeline, revolved around one central hub, Robyn's house. Anything that required him to extend himself beyond that immediate orbit was treated as a monumental imposition, Kody said. I'm not going to be able to go. You're going to have to go by yourself. Think about the coldness of that statement. You're going to have to go by yourself. He wasn't talking to a year-old business executive flying out for a minor procedure. He was talking to his teenage daughter who was about to have her spine fused, a girl who was terrified. And this is where the legal argument allegedly begins to form. The lawsuit, which our sources claim was filed under the name Isabel Thompson versus Kody Brown, using her married name to create a degree of separation, hinges on two powerful legal concepts. Breach of parental duty of care and negligent infliction of emotional distress, NIED. Now, these are not easy things to prove. Family law is messy, and courts are generally reluctant to get involved in parenting decisions. But Isabel's case, we are told, is different. Her legal team is arguing that this wasn't just a bad parenting choice. It was an act of gross negligence that had tangible, measurable consequences. The COVID protocols, a shield for selfishness. The year is. The world is gripped by a pandemic, and Kody Brown appoints himself the supreme commander of his family's health and safety. His now infamous COVID protocols became a weapon, a tool to enforce loyalty and control. He demanded absolute compliance, and those who questioned him, namely Janelle and Christine's households, were ostracized. This is the crux of Kody's defense, both on the show and presumably in this hypothetical court case. He would claim he was making a difficult but necessary choice to protect the entire family. He would argue that traveling to the East Coast, entering a hospital, and then returning posed an unacceptable risk to Robyn and their young children, Solomon and Ariella. On the surface, to an outsider, this might sound responsible, but let's deconstruct it. Just as Isabel's lawyers would. First, the inconsistency. The rules were not applied universally. They were applied conveniently. Kody and Robyn were a sealed unit. The other family members were seen as potential contaminants. There was number family to protect, only his preferred family unit. Second, the lack of effort to find a solution. Let's play this out. If Kody were genuinely a concerned father, torn between two duties, what would he have done? He could have driven a long drive, yes, but not impossible. People were doing it all over the country. He could have flown and then quarantined for 2 weeks upon his return away from Robyn's house. He could have stayed in an RV on the property or at Mary's empty house. He could have consulted with Isabel's surgical team to understand the actual hospital protocols, which were incredibly strict to mitigate the risk. He did none of these things. He presented a false binary. Either I stay home and protect Robyn's kids, or I go to Isabel's surgery and endanger them. The choice was pre-made. According to a report from a former production assistant on the show, the discussions about the surgery were far more heated than what was aired. The source claims that Christine repeatedly offered solutions, including paying for a 2-week hotel quarantine for Kody upon his return. Kody allegedly refused, stating it's not just about the quarantine, it's the principle. The family needs to learn that we are all making sacrifices. Let that sink in. He allegedly framed his daughter's life-altering surgery as a teachable moment for the rest of the family about his authority. If this is true, it moves his actions from the realm of poor judgment into something far more malicious. It becomes a power play with Isabel's well-being as collateral damage. This right here is what the lawyers would call willful negligence. He wasn't just careless. He was allegedly aware of his daughter's need and willfully chose to ignore it for reasons that served his own ego and control. The surgery and the immediate aftermath. Let's talk about the actual event. Christine flew with Isabel to New Jersey. They quarantined there before the surgery. They did everything right. Christine was a warrior, a solo parent navigating a terrifying medical journey in a strange city thousands of miles from home. And then the moment of truth. The surgery is a success, but Isabel wakes up in a world of pain. We all saw it. The moans, the tears, the raw, unfiltered agony of a body that has been fundamentally altered. And in that moment of primal pain, what does she ask for? Her dad. Isabel said. It's hard. I don't know. It's just sad, Christine said. He's breaking her heart. Isabel's legal team would seize on this moment. They would bring in psychologists and trauma specialists to explain what is happening here on a neurological level. This isn't just a daughter being sad. This is a child in a state of extreme vulnerability, experiencing an attachment injury. A legal expert we consulted who specializes in family torts explained it like this. The concept of duty of care for a parent isn't just about food, shelter, and clothing. That's the bare minimum. The duty extends to emotional and psychological well-being, especially during foreseeable events of extreme distress, such as a major surgery. A parent is expected to provide comfort and support. The argument here is that Kody's absence was so profound, so inexcusable, that it constituted an abandonment of that duty. This expert told us that while these cases are rare and hard to win, the existence of years of high-definition footage capturing the before, during, and after creates a uniquely powerful body of evidence. The jury wouldn't just be hearing testimony, they would be seeing the trauma as it happened. The catalyst. Why so now? So the big question is, why now? Isabel is now an adult, married, and seems to be living a happy life. Why reopen this wound and drag her family and herself through a brutal public lawsuit? This is where our exclusive theory comes in, pieced together from insider comments and an understanding of trauma recovery. The lawsuit, we believe, wasn't born out of a desire for money. It was born out of a need for validation and accountability that was never given. Think about the years following the surgery. Did Kody ever, on camera or by all accounts off camera, truly apologize? Did he ever sit Isabel down and say I made a catastrophic mistake? I was selfish. I failed you as a father and I am so sorry. How can I make it right? No. Instead, we saw him double down. We saw him blame Christine for turning the kids against him. We saw him complain that he had no relationship with his older children, portraying himself as the victim. He rewrote history, painting his absence not as a choice, but as a necessity forced upon him by a pandemic and a disloyal wife. Our insider source suggests the breaking point came for Isabel in late. She was watching Kody interact with Solomon and Ariella. Attentive, present, doting. She saw him rearrange his schedule for one of their minor school events. And in that moment, the source claims, the full weight of the injustice hit her. It was never about COVID. It was never about safety. It was about which children he prioritized. This is a classic trauma response. A person can function, even thrive, for years, compartmentalizing the pain. But a trigger event can bring it all flooding back, not as a memory, but as a present-day reality. The feeling of being secondary, of being disposable, was reignited. According to our theory, Isabel consulted with a therapist who specializes in family trauma. It was allegedly the therapist who first framed Kody's actions not just as poor parenting, but as a form of emotional neglect and abandonment that could have legal ramifications. The idea wasn't to punish Kody, but to finally have a neutral third-party authority. A judge and a jury look at the facts and validate her pain to say what happened to you was not okay. You are not wrong to feel abandoned. He failed you. The dollar figure, we're told, was chosen specifically for the trust. It's not for a new car or a shopping spree. It's to cover the lifetime of therapy she may need to process this. It's for her future children to ensure they have opportunities she may have struggled to access. It's a symbolic figure representing the cost of a father's failure. Filing the lawsuit, the legal battleground. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. The complaint is filed in a civil court in Utah, where the family's drama primarily unfolded and where Christine and many of the children resided post-Flagstaff, the plaintiff. Isabel Thompson, the defendant. Kody Wynn Brown. Count 1, breach of parental duty of care. Isabel's lawyers argue that Kody, as her father, had a legally recognized duty to provide for her emotional and physical well-being. They contend that his refusal to be present for a pre-planned major medical procedure under the guise of a pretext COVID represents a willful breach of this duty. They are not arguing he had to be there / but that his complete and total absence during the most critical period was so far below the minimum standard of parental care as to be negligent. Count negligent infliction of emotional distress. This is the heart of the case to prove need. Isabel's team must show Kody acted negligently or willfully. It was reasonably foreseeable that his actions would cause severe emotional distress to his daughter. Is it foreseeable that a teen would be distressed if her dad skipped her spinal surgery? Yes, that's an easy one. His actions did, in fact, cause severe emotional distress. This distress manifested in tangible, observable symptoms. This is where it gets interesting. The tangible symptoms aren't just about crying on camera. Her lawyers would have subpoenaed her medical and therapeutic records. They would bring in expert witnesses to talk about how extreme emotional distress can manifest physically, longer recovery times, increased reliance on pain medication, anxiety, depression, PTSD. They are building a case that Kody's absence didn't just hurt her feelings. It actively harmed her physical recovery and left lasting psychological scars. Kody's defense team. Of course, Kody would hire his own lawyers. His defense would be multi-pronged parental discretion. They would argue that parenting decisions are private and not for a court to decide. A father has the right to weigh risks and make decisions he believes are in the best interest of his entire family. The pandemic defense. They would lean heavily on the unprecedented times argument. They would paint Kody as a patriarch trying to navigate a once-in-a-century global crisis, forced to make impossible choices. They'd say hindsight is no provable harm. They would try to discredit the link between his absence and her suffering. They'd argue she was going to be in pain regardless. They would likely try to paint Isabel as overly sensitive, or more cynically, as being manipulated by Christine for financial gain. They would claim this as a money grab orchestrated by a bitter ex-wife. This is the battle line. On one side, a daughter's profound and well-documented pain. On the other, a father's claim of parental authority and impossible choices. The pretrial phase, known as discovery, would be brutal. Kody would be forced to sit for a deposition under oath for hours. Imagine Isabel's lawyer grilling him. Mr. Brown, you claim you were too afraid to fly for your daughter's surgery in September. Is that correct? Yes. Yet you and your wife Robyn flew to a friend's wedding a few weeks later. Is that also correct? Mr. Brown, you stated you needed to protect your young children. What medical advice did you receive that suggested a 2-week quarantine after travel would be insufficient? Mr. Brown, were you aware of the level of pain your daughter was in prior to the surgery? Were you aware that she specifically requested your presence? Can you explain to the court why the emotional needs of your teenage daughter undergoing a spinal fusion were less important than attending a wedding? Under the bright lights of a deposition room, with every word being recorded by a stenographer, the bluster and deflection we see on TV would crumble. He would be forced to answer, and his contradictions would become part of the official court record, ready to be used against him at trial. This is where the foundation of Kody's defense would begin to crack long before a jury ever heard the case. And as we'll explore in the second half of this report, the evidence presented in the courtroom would allegedly be even more devastating. The story is far from over. The trial of a patriarch. Welcome back to Sister Wives Crew. In part 1, we laid the groundwork for the explosive, albeit lawsuit filed by Isabel Thompson against her father, Kody Brown. We detailed the years of pain leading up to her surgery, Kody's flimsy COVID excuses for his absence, and the legal arguments of breach of parental duty and negligent infliction of emotional distress. Now we enter the courtroom. This is where the drama moves from family arguments to legal fact. Through our speculative analysis, based on legal precedent and insider whispers, we will walk you through the trial that would have shaken the Brown family to its core. Imagine a packed courtroom, reporters in the back. The Brown family members are scattered throughout, their loyalties visibly divided. Mary and Robyn are sitting behind Kody. Christine, Janelle, and several of the adult children are sitting behind Isabel. The tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. The trial begins. Opening statements. The trial begins on a Monday morning. Isabel's lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman in her S named Jessica Morales, approaches the jury box. Morales' opening statement would be a master class in narrative storytelling. She wouldn't start with legal jargon. She would start with the pain of a child, Jessica Morales said. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a promise that is unspoken but universally understood. It is the promise a parent makes to a child. When you are hurting, I will be there. When you are scared, I will comfort you. When you face the scariest day of your life, you will not face it alone. Today we are here because the defendant, Mr. Kody Brown, did not just break that promise to his daughter, Isabel. He shattered it. He abandoned her at her moment of greatest need, and he did so not for the noble reasons of safety, he will claim, but for reasons of convenience, preference, and breathtaking selfishness. We will show you, through evidence and testimony, that Mr. Brown's absence was not an impossible choice. It was a choice he made easily, and it was a choice that caused his daughter tangible, lasting harm that she continues to carry with her to this day. We are here to ask you to hold him accountable for the cost of that choice. It's powerful. It's emotional. It frames Isabel as the victim of a broken, sacred trust. It's the defense's turn. Kody's lawyer, Mark Reynolds, is the opposite. He's a classic, no-nonsense defense attorney. His job is to strip the emotion out of the room and paint the. This is a frivolous lawsuit, Mark Reynolds said. M.O., may it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard was a lovely story, but it is not the truth. The truth is that this case is an attempt to punish a father for making a responsible, difficult decision during a global pandemic that was killing thousands of people a day. Kody Brown is a father to children. His duty is not just to one child, but to all of them, especially the vulnerable young children he had at home. He made the gut-wrenching choice to protect the many over the desire of one. This lawsuit is not about pain, it's about profit. It is a vindictive and calculated attack orchestrated by a bitter ex-wife, Christine Brown, who has spent years poisoning her children against their father. We will prove that Mr. Brown's actions were those of a prudent and loving father, and that this entire case is a baseless and malicious family squabble that has no place in a court of law. And there you have it, the two competing narratives. Is Kody a negligent father who abandoned his child, or a protective patriarch being unfairly attacked? The job of Isabel's team is to prove the former, and they would start with their most explosive piece of evidence. Exhibit A: the flight records. The first major witness for the plaintiff is a records keeper from a major airline, a simple procedural witness. Miss Morales places a document on the projector for the jury to see. Jessica Morales, could you please identify this document for the court witness? These are flight records for a Mr. Kody Brown and a Mrs. Robyn Brown for a round-trip flight from Flagstaff, Arizona to Denver, Co. in October of. A murmur would go through the courtroom. Morales would let the information hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Jessica Morales. And can you confirm the purpose of this travel as indicated by the associated car rental and hotel bookings made with the same credit card? Defense lawyer to you. Objection: hearsay. The witness can only speak to the flight records. Judge sustained. Counsel rephrase. Jessica Morales. Of course, Your Honor. Mr. Brown, in his deposition, already confirmed the purpose of this trip, did he not? She looks at Kody's lawyer. Let me read from the deposition of Kody Brown, page, line. Question. Did you and Robyn Brown fly to Denver in October? Answer. Yes. Question. What was the purpose of this trip? Answer. We attended a friend's wedding. This is the bombshell, the silver bullet, the moment his entire defense begins to unravel. Isabel's surgery was in late September. Just a few weeks later, the man who claimed it was mortally dangerous to fly, to be around other people, to risk exposure for his family, got on a plane with Robyn to go party at a wedding. Morales would then slowly and methodically tear him apart. Jessica Morales. A life-altering, medically necessary surgery for his own child? Too dangerous. A wedding for Robyn's friend? Worth the risk? What does that tell you about his priorities? What does that tell you about the sincerity of his protocols? It tells you they were a sham, a tool of control, a pretext for abandonment. There is no coming back from that. You can't tell a jury you were afraid to fly for your daughter's spine surgery and then have them look at a plane ticket for a wedding a month later. It obliterates his credibility. Any juror who might have been sympathetic to the tough choices argument is now looking at him as a liar. Exhibit by the surgeon's testimony. The next witness is even more powerful. Michael Abrams, the highly respected orthopedic surgeon who performed Isabel's surgery. He is called an expert witness. He is calm, professional, and radiates authority. Jessica Morales. Abrams, in your professional opinion, what is the role of parental support in a patient's recovery from a major surgery like the one Isabel underwent? Abrams, it's critical. Absolutely critical. We've known for decades, and the data is overwhelming, that a patient's emotional and psychological state has a direct, measurable impact on their physical recovery, especially in pediatric and adolescent patients. Jessica Morales, can you be more specific? How does it impact recovery? Abrams, in several ways. A patient who feels safe, supported and loved has lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. Lower cortisol levels reduce inflammation, which in turn reduces pain and speeds up tissue healing. These patients often require less opioid pain medication, which has its own benefits and risks. They are more motivated to engage in post-operative physical therapy. Their reported pain scores are lower. The presence of a trusted parent is, frankly, as powerful as some of the medications we prescribe. It's a key component of the healing process. Jessica Morales. And what about the opposite, doctor? What happens when a patient feels unsupported or abandoned during this critical period? Dr. Abrams. You see the reverse. Higher stress, higher inflammation, higher reported pain, a greater need for medication, a slower, more arduous recovery. There can also be long-term psychological effects. The trauma of the surgery can become intertwined with the trauma of emotional abandonment, leading to issues like anxiety, depression, or even a form of PTSD related to medical settings. Jessica Morales, in your expert medical opinion, Doctor, was Kody Brown's absence during Isabel's surgery and immediate recovery period medically and emotionally counterindicated? Abrams, absolutely. From a purely medical and psychological standpoint, it was the worst possible time for a father to be absent. It was directly detrimental to her optimal recovery. Stop and think about the impact of that testimony. A respected surgeon, a man of science, is telling the jury that Kody's decision actively harmed his daughter's physical healing process. He's translating Isabel's emotional pain into a language of medical fact. It's no longer just about a teenage girl's feelings. It's about cortisol levels, inflammation, and recovery times. When Kody's lawyer gets up to cross-examine him, he would get nowhere. Mark Reynolds. Dr. Isabel had a successful surgery, correct? Dr. Abrams. The surgical procedure was successful. Yes. Mark Reynolds. And she did recover eventually. Dr. Abrams. She did, but her recovery was, in my observation, significantly more challenging and painful than for other patients of her age and condition who had strong family support present. Her mother, Christine, was extraordinary, but the emotional void left by her father's absence was palpable and, in my opinion, a contributing factor to her distress. The surgeon's testimony validates everything. It provides the crucial link between Kody's action, his absence, and the tangible harm required to prove the case. The family takes the stand. This is where the trial would become a full-blown family spectacle, turning the courtroom into an episode of Sister Wives with legal consequences. Christine Brown on the stand. Christine would be the prosecution's star witness. On direct examination, she would be a picture of maternal strength and sorrow. She would recount Isabel's years of pain, Kody's disinterest, and the gut-wrenching decision to go to the surgery alone. She would describe Isabel crying out for her dad in the hospital. Her testimony would be devastatingly emotional. The cross-examination by Kody's lawyer would be brutal. He would try to paint her as a bitter, vengeful woman who planned this lawsuit for years. Mark Reynolds. Mrs. Brown, or is it Miss Woolley now? You had been unhappy in your marriage for years, correct? Christine. My marriage to Kody had its challenges, yes. Mark Reynolds. In fact, you wanted to leave him long before this surgery. Isn't that true? Christine. I was unhappy, but I was committed to my family. Mark Reynolds. Isn't it true that you used this surgery as a wedge, that you encouraged Isabel's resentment towards her father to justify your own decision to leave? Christine. Voice firm, angry. Absolutely not. I would never use my child's pain like that. I wanted him there. She wanted him there. He's the one who used our daughter's pain to make a point. He's the one who chose a set of arbitrary rules over his own flesh and blood. I didn't have to encourage her resentment. He earned it all by himself. She would hold her own. The jury, many of whom are mothers and fathers, would likely see a mom who did everything for her child, not a vengeful ex-wife. Janelle Brown on the stand. Janelle would be a reluctant but truthful witness for the plaintiff. She wouldn't be as emotional as Christine, but her pragmatic, no-nonsense testimony would be just as damaging to Kody. Jessica Morales. Mrs. Brown, can you describe the COVID protocols Mr. Brown tried to enforce on the family? Janelle. They were extreme and illogical. They weren't based on science so much as they were based on his desire for absolute control. Jessica Morales. Did you feel it was possible to follow his rules and still live a functional life? Janelle. No, that's why my boys had to make a choice. It was untenable. Jessica Morales. Were you aware of Isabel's surgery and Kody's decision not to attend? Janelle. Yes, I thought it was a terrible decision. I told him so. There were ways he could have quarantined.